So I want to do a quick response to the user bubbamickmac, who posted a response to both To Be Serious and I on science and religion. And I want to respond specifically to um, the question of whether or not methodological naturalism is a threat to religious belief or spiritual a spiritual worldview. And I don't necessarily think it's a threat, but in practice, what exactly methodological naturalism means and how it plays out in someone's life who calls themselves a methodological naturalist or someone who is scientifically minded. Uh, in each given case, what this way of thinking uh, or how this way of thinking plays out in someone's life will be different. Um, I do think any kind of naturalism, whether metaphysical or methodological. I mean, really, metaphysical naturalism is just methodological naturalism carried through to its implications. If one is merely a methodological naturalist, then as a metaphysician, you remain a skeptic, and at best, if you've articulated or at least responded to the need for metaphysics as a skeptic, or at worst, as a methodological naturalist, you're sort of just you've left the metaphysical unthought, and so are ignorant of it. And maybe this pluralism that you mentioned, this need for proof, or for things to be falsifiable, for evidence, for reason, and for logic. I think these are all important things to keep in mind when we're trying to understand our experience as selves, our relation to others, and our relation to the larger cosmos. We want to be reasonable, we want to be logical, and we want our opinions and beliefs to be based on evidence rather than just inherited tradition. So in short, we want to think for ourselves. I think that's essentially what modernity has to offer to the pre-modern traditional worldview, and what most who advocate for a scientific as opposed to a religious worldview mean when they refer to a scientific worldview. They mean you think for yourself, you evaluate the evidence based on its own merits, and you think in a clear and logical way about that evidence. Now, you said something else, bubbamickmac, about you said basically that whatever can be observed in the natural world ought to be studied, and that's basically what science does. And that, in contrast, whatever isn't seen or experienced in the natural world or in human consciousness, you said that should be ignored, and that there's no reason to believe in any of it. And I don't disagree with you. It's just a matter of how open or closed our definition of nature is, and how open or closed our definition of human consciousness is. We have our physical bodies have at least five senses, right? And if we take one of those five senses, the eye is capable of seeing that aspect of the world of which it itself is constituted. So the physical eyes see the physical world, but just as light is to the eye, ideas are to the mind, and so we can think of the mind as a kind of sensory organ, an organ of perception. In the world that the logician navigates when thinking is indeed a sort of spiritual world, certainly not a physical world. The materialist would say, well, no, this is just brain activity. But I think that's to replace the immediate experience of being a logician and thinking intelligently with this later abstraction, this scientific object studied by neuroscientists. It's the fallacy of misplaced concreteness, as Whitehead put it. The spiritual world isn't somewhere else beyond nature. The spiritual world is something we participate in all the time, naturally. Um, to say that there is no supernature and only nature, and to mean that nature is the observable physical world reached by our physical senses, I think as I tried to explain in my original response to be serious, this is to leave the human being or human consciousness out of our cosmology, out of the picture that we have of the world, and to erect a picture of the world as if it were just a collection of objects out there, whereas really, science is an activity which is embedded in the ongoing evolution of the universe itself. And the models that science builds of this universe and the theories it devises end up helping the universe to create itself. And so they're as much creations as they are discoveries. And so this question of observation and evidence is important. And science, true knowledge, if we are to have it, should be based on experience. But I think where a lot of methodological naturalists go wrong is by artificially limiting the extent to which the human soul can cultivate and grow new organs of perception, which relate to and participate in higher order realms of cosmic existence. I think we live in a many-layered universe, and the physical, by which I mean that world which our physical senses, our eyes, our ears, our mouth, our skin, the world that we live in as a body is only one of many layers, which, when I refer to angelic hierarchies, I mean that there are invisible to the physical senses, invisible worlds that sort of feed on our world, both through the energies that we produce and the energies that they produce to give to us. The spiritual world is an ecology in that sense. It's all about relationship. And so maybe hierarchy is a misleading term. It's not like orders are issued by divine decree from the top and the bottom must obey. No, it's one organism, and the top has to obey the needs of the bottom as much as the bottom has to respond to the top. So I'm not a pluralist necessarily. Not that I don't think those things, proof, evidence, reason, and logic are important. I think it's obvious I'm more of a Platonist of some kind. And I'm unashamed. There are problems with Plato. He was a mortal human being, and his even though he said in his letters that he never wrote down what he actually thought, and so all his dialogues then are kind of an exercise in thought, but not necessarily the truth as he understood it. But in that sense, that there is a true world that the human being can know by participating in, and that true world is essentially eternal and ideal, good, true, and beautiful at its essence. In that sense, I'm a Platonist. And so when it comes to questions of religion and science, I tend to end up sounding more religious, even though I think everything which science has revealed to us about the nature of nature must be regarded as valid and true, and needs to be incorporated into any honest conception of the nature of reality as a whole. If there is more than nature, whatever that moreness is, it must not be or exist in contradiction to nature. So, looks like I'm done in just enough time. Let me know what you think. Take it easy.